No, I'm not running out of ideas. So just for the fun of it, I thought I'd make a video that tests my extensive anime knowledge. In this case, the overused tropes of this long and respectable medium. Now, in the very unlikely chance you don't know, my specialization is generally the slice of life genre, and of course the yuri genre when it concerns the field of anime. But don't think for a second that means I'm some sort of anime greenhorn. Yeah, I haven't watched every single shonen anime that comes in droves every single season, nor have I watched every single harem or isekai anime that shows off their consistently creative and original premises. But you know what I do have? A fucking sense of humor. And that'll be the gist of this video, listing off and explaining 10 blatant anime cliches and taking the piss out of them. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that I dislike all these tropes. Far from it. The fact that some of them still exist even today is worthy of a raucous applause. But there are some that I and many others have a bone to pick, and would gladly dance on the grave of while listening to Because I Got High. Topical. Alright, let's do this. Number 10. Protagonists running late to school with a goddamn piece of bread in their mouth. This is what compelled me to make this video. What other imagery better encapsulates the shoujo anime genre than an adolescent girl dashing out of her house with total abandon, with her only choice of nourishment being a piece of bread, and topped with almost exclusively jelly. For generations, this trope became the first thing people experienced as they stepped into the world of anime. It also taught us some very important Japanese phrases, including itekimasu and shikoku. Apparently, this hilarious iconography first appeared in 1962 in the ridiculously long-running Saze-san manga, where it was pulled off by series staple and constant panty flasher Wakame-chan. And at some point, early shoujo manga had the trope incorporate the main character accidentally running into someone around a corner, usually a love interest, which is also its own cliche. But thankfully it became tiring real fast, and anime studios started parodying it like it was the new biggest trend. So maybe you can say that the parodies are becoming cliche too. But for a while this became a classic way to begin an anime. Naturally, because it endears us to a ditzy protagonist, and kicks the story in motion with them eventually meeting the second main character. And I guess later finding out that they're a new student that transfers into their class or something. Those Japanese, they sure know their story beats. Number 9. Accidentally falling into sexually compromising positions. Speaking of bumping into people by accident, here's one that takes the innocence out of the shoujo genre. No fucking doubt you've seen this happen where the protagonist accidentally falls on top of their love interest and winds up in a suggestive and totally unforeseeable position, such as planting his face into her boobs, accidental groping, being buried underneath her skirt, and other Kama Sutras. But if you're a good little Christian, you got the PG version, where both parties end up with a simple embrace of the lips instead. But more likely than not, this cliche falls under the pervert camp. Often associated with rom-coms and harem anime, there's very little reason to implement this trope other than to give the viewer a little spark in the old libido engine. Simply put, it's a fan service staple. A good case study of this cliche is how it's used in the To Love Ru series, where harem protagonist Yuki Rito is utterly incapable of avoiding this supernatural phenomenon. Anytime there's a female character less than a meter away from him, the universe seemingly causes him to trip into her, leading to many raunchy predicaments. It's not like he wants to wind up in these harrowing scenarios. In fact, we should all feel super bad for him, and pray that this unenviable disease doesn't turn him into a bitter old codger. Anyway, the more advanced version of this cliche is having this event take place followed up with a third character witnessing the end result. And of course, wacky misunderstandings ensue. Regardless of the reasoning or the laws of physics, seemingly anytime an anime character falls on top of another, it results in them being one step away from copulating. My only hope is that Yuri will make greater use of this. We already seen this trope occurring in reality, so it's not unfathomable to see more anime girls partake in the spoils amongst each other. Number 8. Transformations and special attacks taking fucking forever. Have you ever wondered whenever a character's in the middle of charging one of their super special one-of-a-kind attack, why the enemy never tries to immediately decapitate them? Or when a group of henshin fighters go into battle and proceed to morph into their hero forms, but in reality would have taken less time to order a cappuccino? Well, you're not crazy for thinking that, dear viewers, because it is in fact there by design. Obviously, we like our shonen anime to have cool shonen protagonists doing crazy and flashy stuff shonenly. It gets us pumped up and glued to the screen. But clearly writers aren't always thinking about how to properly illustrate this in a contextually practical manner. Maybe the heroes have some sort of magic shield that goes up every time they enter charge attack mode.
Hey Hey, kid, that knocks you down.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, huh, I got you.
Nuh-uh. Because my cloak is made of a titanium alloy that shields me from heat.
That's bullcrap. Titanium alloy, my ass.
Or maybe they're thinking that the villains or whatever are just as mesmerized as the audience when they're watching the heroes transform too. I mean, they can be quite hypnotic, after all. Or as widespread and sporadic as this cliche is, I'm kinda surprised it isn't parodied more. I mean, maybe it is, but I just haven't seen a lot of them. One of my favorite parodies is in The Demon Girl Next Door, where every time Momo does her magical transformation, we see a timer at the bottom showing exactly how long it takes her to finish transforming, with new records set throughout the anime. Number 7. The protagonists having parents that are either dead or traveling abroad. It's no shock to anyone that a majority of anime feature characters who are in their teenage years, which means that they're likely in the care of parents or adult guardians. But adults are cringe, and they cramp everyone's style. So a common plot convenience is just to make the main character's parents deceased, or less depressing, traveling overseas. But as a more useful plot device, the deceased parents can also act as motivation for our angsty protagonist to get revenge. You could say that this trope walks over dead bodies. Regardless, the most common reason you see this cliche is because the writers want to expand the number of opportunities to their young and often lustful protagonist. Think about it. If these characters don't have things like curfew and supervision, who knows what kind of wild and crazy shit they can get up to. Freak-offs are just the tutorial phase. Again, also commonly seen in rom-coms and harem anime, which thrives on spunky characters engaging in the most outlandishly risque activities. So it's important to eliminate any pesky authority figures who may pose a threat to achieving these scenarios. Be it a smoking hot isekai demon lord who suddenly wants to live under the same roof as you, or a long-lost non-blood related stepsister whose hobby involved taking selfies and fashionable lingerie around the house. None of these can be achieved without the removal of the parents. I'm surprised an anime hasn't used CPS as an excuse yet. Number 6. The protagonist is totally irresistible and ends up with a bevy of hot girls, despite being unremarkable or total trash. Speaking of rom-coms and harems, how many anime have you seen starring a total virgin loser that keeps pulling in girls like they're 1-stars in a gacha game? But in this case, they're all 5 stars. Well, there's a ton of them. And just like a ton of anything, there's a good reason for it. The protagonist, often a young man, is by all accounts totally average in every sense of the word. No particular skills to speak of, nor any special standing amongst his peers. And he may or may not have a lower IQ compared to the average high schooler. Yet through some divine intervention, he suddenly finds himself the center of attention amongst a circle of eccentric and highly attractive females. No matter what he does, he can't rid himself of this inexplicable phenomenon, and reluctantly chooses to accept his new and incorrigible reality. This is what is known as a power fantasy. I want to say that the first harem anime is Urusei Yatsura from 1981. In fact, it popularized many classic anime tropes, particularly the perverted ones. Anyway, sometimes the protagonist is average, sometimes they're raging perverts, and other times they're godlike super chads with all the powers everyone has ever thought of. No matter the premise, you're likely to trace it back to the writers self-inserting themselves to live out their fantasies. The most honorable among them, you could say, is the unremarkable harem protagonist, where they're often simply trying to live out their lives in the most normal way possible. But wouldn't you know it, some goddamn horny maidens pop out of nowhere and rob him of his perfect daily life. And if that weren't enough, he's constantly plagued by sexual advances, but honorably chooses celibacy for the time being. If I were to cosplay a psychologist, I would say that this is the writer's way of allowing us plebes to relate to the protagonist. Hey, here's a guy who also has no riz, but even he can pull hot anime girls with very little effort, or even by doing absolutely nothing at all. And by being non-reciprocal, this shows restraint and chivalry. A gentleman of the highest order. Something we all strive towards but are too imprisoned by our mortal sins. Now, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't mention this trope existing in the Yuri genre as well. But honestly, that's like comparing the Stone Age to modern day. We still got a long way to go. And as for the perverted harem protagonists, well, let's face it, if you're watching these shows, you probably already relate to the protagonist. But in all seriousness, the reason this trope is so popular is because the viewer can insert themselves into these lucky bastards, and live out their lecherous fantasies without guilt or shame. Of course, the obvious cost of this is usually a character with next to no personality or agency to speak of. They're like a living fleshlight being controlled by external forces, or just have a single defining character trait, such as awkward, depraved, or just plain stupid. Number 5. nosebleeds. As perpetually indoorsy loners in constant low humidity environments, it's no surprise seeing the old schnozzle get the occasional Red Sea party. But I guarantee you that you will not get a nosebleed from getting turned on like a creepy pervert. However, that's the reality that plagues anime characters since the dawn of time. The basic idea behind it is that when a character encounters something that arouses them, i.e. seeing panties, it becomes so stimulating that it causes their blood pressure to rise, and subsequently gush out of their nose uncontrollably. It's totally ludicrous, but obviously designed to be. This trope is naturally paired with anything fanservice related, and it speaks volumes to our own sexual depravity. No pun intended. Characters having hearts for eyes is essentially the same trope. But then why is it considered more innocent? Could it be because after getting sexually aroused by something, you immediately shoot large quantities of fluids from your body? There couldn't possibly be anything sexual about that. This is the same reason why Japan loves using tentacles in anime too, because the other option would be a major no-no for broadcasting. So they just went with the next best thing. Now thankfully this trope isn't relegated to just men, as female characters get their fair share of blood bursting too, showing that perviness isn't just a one-sided monopoly. Number 4. Female characters having huge bazongas. Speaking of a big monopoly, there's absolutely no deeper meaning behind this. People like titties. People like big titties. Anime comes out with lots of big titties. People very happy. This is probably the most blatant use of fan service in all of anime and manga. But what makes it a unique cliche is the sheer size of these badonkers. And just in case you've forgotten, but women in real life seldom have boobs the size of watermelons.
Why?
So creepy.
Creepy?
Huge boobs, like impossible.
It's just like real Japanese women.
What makes it even crazier is that we mainly see girls who recently finished puberty sporting some of the largest honkers. And at this point, I need to remind myself to tread very carefully. Now, of course, anime isn't meant to be an accurate depiction of reality. No one's disputing that. But when your intention is to garner as many eyes as possible on the characters, when said characters are still in their teenage years, you can't help but feel a little uncomfortable. Now, obviously, I don't think this will change anytime soon. In fact, we're so desensitized to buxom characters now that whenever there's an anime girl with a C or even a D cup, they're considered to be on the flatter end. Sadly, an average bust size in the anime world will probably turn a lot of heads in reality. Again, this ain't rocket science. Most anime viewers are either young horny men or old horny men. So it's merely an example of the industry just capitalizing on our baser instincts. And by gun it, it's fucking working. It's not even unusual anymore seeing an anime filled entirely with top-heavy maidens. But at least they aren't always just for show. Sometimes they can even be weapons of mass destruction. Number 3. Characters monologuing for no damn good reason. Now to be fair, this cliche isn't restricted to only anime. But who's gonna deny that it hoards this trope like white trash on A&E? Just like the villains not beating the crap out of the heroes when they're in the middle of transforming, this trope is in many ways more insulting, but strangely equally hilarious. You'll often see this in villain monologues, power explanations, and of course flashback sequences. Again, there's no deeper reasoning to this other than being easy exposition dumping, and to pad out the runtime. It's pretty much a rite of passage for any shonen anime to include this, and it typically rears its ugly head during intense fight scenes. Dragon Ball is one of the greatest offenders of this. Every single character must have taken monologuing lessons, because that shit goes on like the f***ing Energizer Bunny. There are just too many questions that crop up thanks to characters flapping their gums at highly inappropriate times. Like a villain confidently explaining their master plan to the hero just for them to be foiled at the last minute, or a character having a prolonged internal dialogue just seconds before getting hit with an attack, or the classic explaining how your powers work because either everyone is so goddamn curious, or you're just a smug-faced prick. I don't think I can do it justice explaining the extent that this cancerous trope has on the anime industry. Like I said, I'm not that big on shonen anime. I'm sure it's still prevalent today though, but I would like to think that it's also heavily clowned upon. One of my favorite jabs of this trope is from the king of shonen subversions, One Punch Man. And I don't even have to explain it because you obviously know which scene I'm talking about.
それに対してお前は傷が増すばかり体力も徐々に減っているうるせえペラペラペラペラともう終わりなのか戦いは
Number 2. The power of friendship triumphs over everything. So f*** you. Just like the previous cliche, this one is a doozy in the shonen genre. The scene is set. Our heroes have just fought an epic battle with the powerful, well-established main villain of the series. They put in everything they got. but it still wasn't enough to defeat their mighty foe. Just when all hope is lost, our protagonist slowly rises up, remembering all the fun and goofy times he and his companions shared together. With heroic determination, he launches his most powerful final attack on the villain, and who for some reason is suddenly blindsided by all the positive energy exhibited. The villain is barely able to hold back the attack, but with one final hoorah, the hero draws every ounce of strength he has left and is finally able to overwhelm him. At last, the villain is then defeated, and good has won the day, because evil is dumb. Now let's not be too cynical here. We all know that fighting for a worthy cause and all that makes you more motivated. And when that cause happens to be the survival of your close friends, then of course you're gonna go beast mode from time to time. The problem is that it's become so predictable and corny. The whole friends are your greatest strength and will overcome any obstacles. This is also apparent in lots of magical girl anime, but I'm willing to give those a pass just because they're typically aimed towards younger audiences. Their minds haven't been corrupted by cynicism yet. Anyway, if you want to see this trope in full swing, then look no further than Fairy Tail, a series that is replete with characters going insano style after thinking of their dear comrades. And while Fairy Tail is pretty much all about overcoming adversity through shared bonds, i.e. Nakama power, I do understand why it can get tiring seeing the same outcome getting recycled over and over again. Although I did stop watching around the 100 episode mark, so maybe they toned it down a little. At the end of the day, this trope is basically a cheat code for writing yourself out of a corner. How do the heroes resolve a conflict that basically spells doom for all of existence? Well, they basically just believe in their friends or get super pissed off, and steamroll through whatever bullshit was just kicking their asses. People love seeing a good clutch, but when it's turned down in the same old way like spam on an assembly line, you start craving for something with a little more flavor. And that's probably a good note to end this video on, if not for number 1. But we're both girls. Ain't I a stinker? That's right. The last trope on this list is one that I and many of my Yuri contemporaries are all too familiar with. We all know the drill. A girl is faced with the unenviable task of responding to her friend's sudden confession. Without missing a beat, she answers with the astute observation of them both being the same gender. To be honest, I can only chuckle lightheartedly every time I see this cliche in action. It's so silly that I can't even be upset with it. This trope might be more common in manga than anime, but you'd think that writers would come up with something a little more compelling than this predictable line. Simply put, it's just a very odd thing to say in the given context. Realistically, you'd think their first response would be, "Sorry, I don't swing that way." Or, "Let me think about it and get back to you." Or maybe even, "I'm not gay, but I'll learn." You know, something that has more agency to it. Instead, we get a line that is pretty vague. The person isn't accepting or rejecting it outright, and also cites that some external force is preventing them from dating or even liking each other. I'm assuming that this is the writer's way of being coy and dramatic. Kinda like Romeo and Juliet, with the whole "but I'm a Capulicker and you're a Montagoon," or whatever they're called. Anyway, thankfully this cliche is starting to fade into the shadow realm. I think the last time we saw it was in I'm in Love with a Villainess almost 3 years ago. But at least in that one there are legit societal reasons against the main characters being together. If you want a good antidote to this trope, then just watch this scene from episode 7 of Bloom Into You. It's honestly one of the most beautiful responses to liking someone of the same gender, as well as liking someone in general. But that's what I've come to expect from one of the greatest Yuri series of all time. Well, there we have it. 10 random anime cliches in all their cliche anime glory. Obviously, there are way more out there that I'm sure you are barking at the screen. So let me know which other annoying anime tropes you want me to clown on. I'm sure I would have a few coarse words for them. Incidentally, this was a fun video to make, so I definitely wouldn't mind doing another one down the road. Again, you can let me know by commenting and liking the video. This obviously isn't my usual content, but I do enjoy throwing the odd curveball now and then. Alright, see you around.